All right. Good evening, everybody. Bruchim Abayim. I want to talk about this organization, Am Echad, which has been lobbying the Israeli government as to not change some of the things in Israel. So this is and why I personally haven't signed any of the petitions that they've sent out and so forth. So I want to express, some of the ideas behind this. So before I get started, I want to tell a story. There's a Hasidic Rebbe that I was a Gabba for, Shadlovtzer Rebbe. He should be well. A very choshev Yid in Yerushalayim, from a very choshev family. And he got the Rebbe Vista from a Shver. It was Biala Rebbe. And when his Shver was nifter, some of the Hasidim wanted him to be Rebbe. He said only if he could take a different name. He doesn't want to call himself Biala. So the first Biala Rebbe, his father was from Nosson David of Shadlovtzer, was a big Rebbe, a lot of Hasidim. And he said, there's no one calling himself Shadlovtzer Rebbe, he'll call himself Shadlovtzer Rebbe. And Taka, he has a lot of things that in his life that are very similar to this tzaddik from Nosson David, and has a very big kesher to Nosson David, and another Admorim of Shadlovtzer. And also, he's Baruch Hashem, he's Matzliach from the Rebbe Vista in Yerushalayim, an Americana Yid, I'm saying, a Borough Park Yid, a Babaver Yid, as Governor Rebbe, and from he himself, it's Sanzerenical. And this Rebbe, he should be well. He's just a wonderful person, just a very warm, caring individual, and a real tzaddik. And he told me the following story. He said that one of his Hasidim asked Rebbe, should he go to Bechiras or not? Meaning in Eretz Yisrael, one of the big differences between the various Haredi groups is whether or not you vote. Particularly in the national elections. The municipal elections is less controversial, but the national election is a big controversy. So the side of the Agudah Yisrael is that it's a big mitzvah to vote. You have to, it's a chiyuv, it's an obligation to vote. And the side of the Agudah Haredis is that it's a big avera to vote. You're not allowed to vote. I think it was the Brisker Rav, or maybe it was the Chazanish, I don't remember which one it was, who said it's not as big of a mitzvah to vote as Rav Aaron Kotler says, and it's not as big of an avera to vote as the Satmar Rav says, but somewhere in between. So anyway, the Shadlovtzer Rebbe Shlita, he said to this Chosid, I hope he doesn't mind me telling the story, because it's a very powerful story for this reason. So he said to this Chosid, what does your father do? Meaning, if your father votes, you should vote. If your father doesn't vote, you shouldn't vote. You shouldn't just follow me as your Rebbe, because he understands that he's attracted Hasidim from different places, looking for a Rebbe, right? And one of the old Hasidim there, he said, what are you talking about? He said, I myself, I vote, but I'm not going to tell somebody else what to do, because there's, Shalom bias issues, there's Kibbut Aim issues, that comes first. So you should follow your father's minig. Minig, it's not an issue of a minig, but your father's derech in this issue, and not mine as a Rebbe. And it's a very strong thing. It's a very, very strong thing. And so for that reason, I'm telling you the same thing. First of all, bin ich kein Rebbe. Even I call myself as a joke a Rebbe, not as a joke. I want to show covet to my ancestor, the Chavos Yor, who I love and admire and developed a very strong kesher with personally. But I don't want people to follow me as a Rebbe. You know, I took this name not as a joke, but as it's a different type of thing by Hungarians. You know, that's one thing you should understand. You know, my Zeta was Hungarian, and that's what the line that goes back to the Chavos Yor. I mean, before Hungary, they were in Germany. That line, and of course, the Chavos Yor has thousands, probably millions of Einiklach around, right? So it's not, but I particularly feel a kesher to him, personally, very warm. And also I learned from the Shidlovtzer Rebbe, right, not to take a name that someone else has. Certainly not a name that is in the Mishpacha, you know, all his brothers-in-law there, and his wife's uncles, the Ala Rebbes. He certainly didn't want to take that name, but my ancestors were Abonim and Krula and Chenger and Verdan and where was Temeshvar, all these different towns that already have Rebbes. There's already Temeshvar Rebbe, there's already, 3 Krula Rebbes, there's already Chenger Rebbe, even they're from different mishpachas. So I didn't want to take a name, and also I didn't feel like I was roy to take the name Verms, where Chavos Yor and the Seif Yomov was the Rav and his father and grandfather were Rabbanim and Verms, because Verms is the Ir Ve'im Yisrael. So to take that, I'm not roy for that. But the Chavos Yor was Rav in Koblenz for a few years, and then they didn't renew the contract. That's like me in Richmond, when I was the Rav in Richmond. And so I feel that's why, and also Koblenz sounds really cool. People don't know that it's in Germany. It sounds like it's somewhere, it sounds like Koritz or Koznitz, or, it sounds like a really good name, So, so anyway, but I don't mean it like a Rebbe of Hasidim. I don't mean it that people should blindly follow me or anything. That's not what we do by Hungarians anyway. We don't believe in that nonsense. And I'm not worthy for that. I'm a Rasha Marusha. I'm a Choyta Machte. So really, it's Koblenzer Ruf, not Koblenzer Rebbe. Just in English, people know Rebbe better, so to say, right? But anyway, so what? Back to what I'm saying here, though. I'm sharing this as to explain my opinion, personally, politically, and this is Badavka not Das Torah. This is Badavka not a Torah opinion. This is not a halachic opinion. This is a political opinion. And so therefore, to a certain extent, I would say I am wrong in what I'm saying here, but I cannot bring myself to do something, to sign something that I don't believe in. And I've signed a lot of things that I believe in that people are upset at me about. But I signed them because I believe in them. And this B'davka I don't believe in, and I cannot bring myself, today was, it's already nighttime, but today was the Yahrzeit from Heilige Rebbe Melech, right? And Heilige Rebbe Melech, of course, he said not to talk too much, which I'm being over on that. I'm talking way too much. I have a big mouth. I talk too much. But, so I'm violating that. But one thing is interesting. He said that a person should when they're feeling some kind of a physical pleasure that's permitted, it's a mitzvah, they should think to themselves that they would have a greater pleasure in the spiritual pleasure of dying as a martyr than they would of experiencing this physical pleasure of food or sex or whatever it is. And yet, he says you have to make sure you're being honest with yourself and not being going of das el yoin, not robbing the supernal mind. Don't lie to yourself. If you really feel that way, you can say it. You should try to get to that point where you feel that way. But don't lie to yourself. And so I guess there's a chisoron in me that I'm not oimik al das Torah, and I'm not oimid here al das Torah, and it's something maybe I have to do tshuva for. I am moide that. I admit that there's something perhaps wrong with me personally, but I am so convinced of the ideology of libertarianism on a political scale that I have a very hard time with this issue. And furthermore, not that this is in any way the position of Satmar. I don't know what the position of Satmar is on this, but I'll tell you one thing I do know. Many years ago, there was a petition going out in Satmar to make sure that the Israeli government did not take over Meron. Because Meron, that's the one holy place, major holy place in Eretz Yisrael that's still kosher according to the Satmar view. Meaning that they cannot go, the Satmar cannot go to Koisel and can't go to Kever Rochel and can't go to Maras Machpelah because these are run by the Israeli government. And there are other issues with it too. But even if people go, they understand that they're doing something wrong by going. But Meron, and I kind of have a feeling that the reason why they sprayed the water on the Eden there in Meron, the Zionim sprayed the water and killed those people, murdered those people, I consider it a murder, a massacre, and I say it's the Israeli government's fault, not the Erlich Eden who were there. It's the Zionist government's fault for what happened in Meron. And I stand by that, even though people are uncomfortable with me saying that the Tzionim are Rotzchim. Satmar Rav said that whatever Brisker Rav said that wasn't so kanoish, he said Brisker Rav really agreed with Satmar Rav on everything, just he was afraid of Ritzichas. He was afraid they're going to kill him because they killed the Han, they kill other people, they're murderers, they have blood on their hands, so he was afraid to say the wrong thing, he didn't want to offend them. Whereas in America, Baruch Hashem, we have freedom of speech, we can say what we want, and we don't have to worry about offending, although now we might be losing that with this pretender to the throne. If this guy got away with stealing the election the way he obviously did, everybody who has eyes can see that the election was stolen. And so the same thing, if he could get away with that, he could get away putting us in concentration camps. It's very scary times we live in. But nonetheless, we have to have faith in God. I want to get back to this subject of the Koisel. And so in a way it is related to this, that these issues, but it's a bigger issue. But again, this is my personal view, Joe Kolakowski. This is not official Satmar view, but I think the Satmar Hasidim, we want to call them Hasidim, Satmar Kehila, I think is more accurate. As far as I know, they are not signing these petitions that the Gadistan are sending. And I think that it's intellectually honest, in my opinion, that way, if you're a Satmar. If you're really anti-Zionist, it's none of our business what they do. It's none of our, meaning, one thing, Meron, it's like, that's the shtickle, that's still ours. They didn't take that from us yet. They didn't rob that from us. But But the koisel is a shine for fallen. You understand what I'm saying? Meaning that it's a lost cause already. I don't mean it like the southern lost cause. But you hear what I'm saying? The Western Wall, it's already a lost cause. None of our business, it's bad. So they have Israeli flag there. Is that any worse? Is it any worse that if they have girls reading from the Torah there? If they have egalitarian services at the Western Wall? What's the nafkamina? You already have the Israeli flag there. You already have the symbol of Amalek there. So that they're not going to have coveted tzibur, that's somehow worse than having the Israeli flag there. And with all due respect to our monotheistic cousins, but from the standpoint of the way most Jews think about this, tell me, is it really worse for a girl to read from the Torah for her bat mitzvah at the Koisel than it is on the Har Bayis itself, that another religion has a shrine there? On the Kodesh Kodashim Mistama, on the Evan Shasiya Mistama, according to most opinions, that's the Dome of the Rock, even if it's another religion that shares our theology, but nonetheless it's a different religion. So is there such a big nafkamina between next to the Har Bayis by the Koisel, if a girl is going to read from the Torah for her bat mitzvah, which even if we in our religious views oppose that personally, but I'm saying as far as getting the government to ban so the one thing, the big answer they always have is this is the status quo. This is the way it's always been. So we're just asking they shouldn't change from the way it's always been. And I hear that. But is the status quo really that richtig? Is it worth making a shtickle achil Hashem? Is it worth being merachik? Meaning the people that we disagree with theologically and halachically, and these other movements, we would say away from Judaism. Certainly Reform and Reconstruction and Humanist are away from Judaism. Conservative is a halachic movement that has views that are different than ours, although unfortunately more and more of people who are identifying as conservative rabbis do not believe in permanent Shemayim. So then those people are heretics. But there are within the ranks of conservative Judaism people who are little o-orthodox and who practice halacha according to the lenient opinions of conservative Judaism, which makes them chutz l'machanenu. They're outside of our camp, but they're not necessarily sinners. That they have different views on these things. It makes them perhaps sinful, but they're not outside of Klal Yisrael, but they're outside of our machane. They're outside of our camp. You can still call them chutz l'machane, but they're not outside of the Klal Yisrael. But the Reform are, because they're heretics, all of them are heretics, and they reject the binding nature of halacha, make it be something that's optional. They are not only chutz l'machane, they are not part of the Klal Yisrael, but nonetheless, they are human beings, and we have to have kavod habrios. We have to respect them as human beings, just like we respect Christians and Muslims and atheists and Hindus and Buddhists and Wiccans and everybody else, and treat them with basic human dignity. And the type of things that you see when the Women of the Wall, which is separate from this issue, the Women of the Wall want separate. It's only a women's thing, but they want the women to lane. They're not asking for mixed service, not even really egalitarian service. What they're asking for is what the chief rabbi of Israel, who we in the Haredi world opposed, Rabbi Shlomo Goren, but what he taught, he taught that the women are allowed to do, you have 10 women, it's the same like 10 men. And they can't do this in front of the men, but by the women, by themselves, they can do it. And I think Rav Lazer Silver said something similar to that too, who is Peninsula, right? He is from our camp, he's someone that we respect, Rav Lazer Silver. And I believe that he held, certainly, that women could say Kaddish with 10 women, and maybe if they could say the Kaddish, what's the nafkamina between the Kaddish and any other Davar Shebekadusha? So, I know my holy Zayda, the Chavos Yor, said women cannot say Kaddish. And Baruch Hashem, in my family, my mother, she holds to that. But the general thing in most of the modern Orthodox world is that they do allow the women to say Kaddish quietly behind the Mechitza. And Rabbi Soloveitchik from YU, from Boston, Zeichet Tzach Levrocha, he said he remembers as a boy in Brisk, Azoyz Gevein, he could hear the women behind the Mechitza saying Kaddish. So, again, alright, that's the 20th century already, but Mimanov Shach, there's Almi Lismaich, and to make this the hill to die on, these types of issues, is really silly, and it makes us look primitive and foolish, and it creates unnecessary wedges that will lead people to not be interested in what we have to sell, particularly when we're being intellectually dishonest. That we're just doing it this way just because it's always been done this way. Which again, for our communities, for our kehillas, we have to stick that way. But we cannot say that the other people who do differently are heretical unless they're actually heretical. Meaning the reform is a heresy. Conservative is not a heresy. It's a heteropraxy. But not a heterodoxy, really, although it could be. There are some heterodox conservative rabbis. Maybe even now they might be the majority. But they believe, nonetheless, in the necessity of practice. So, and again, they have Rishonim, Achronim, that they can quote, even though that's not how we see the halachic process is working. Because usually what they're quoting is a das yochid, and we don't yochid v'rabim, halachic v'rabim. We're not makabel a das yochid. We don't accept an individual opinion over a majority opinion, but nonetheless, we cannot say that someone who accepts a das yochid is a heretic. We can say they're chutz l'machanenu, but they are still part of Klal Yisrael. So that's one part. That's the religious part of it. But then there's the political part of it. And the only problem is with Israel is I'm not sure, does this political part of it still, does it keep up? Meaning, because Israel is not a libertarian country, maybe it wouldn't work in Israel. But maybe we can make Israel more libertarian. It seems to me that Naftali Bennett, I think he's an American boy, I'm not sure. But anyway, he wears a yarmulke. I think he puts on tefillin every day. even it's a small yarmulke, even he doesn't have payas, according to most Deos. But he seems to be, it's the ironic thing that there is this. Most of the voting Charedim in Israel prefer a Mechal Shabbos before Hesia like Netanyahu, as opposed to a Shomer Torah Mitzvahs, even if he's a Mekel like Bennett. And why is that? I don't know. I'm not sure. But that's the world we live in. So, and the reason is because Netanyahu is working with the Haredim, but I think politically it's more in the Haredi interest to have more liberty, like we do in America, than to have more power. The only problem is, what if the left seizes power in Israel? I don't think, Bennett, he's not like Smolani. He is more liberal as opposed to leftist. And in Israel, they don't really know from liberalism. They know from leftism and rightism, and neither one is liberal. Whereas like in America, we have, our conservatism is really classical liberalism. And our left is really more of what would be considered conservative or authoritarian in other countries, because America is such a different species than any other country. There's no place like America. And this whole story with the COVID and everything really brings that out. Where we see Canada and New Zealand and Australia doing things we would never expect them to do. So in any event, I don't forgive the Agudistan for stating their claim. I think they're being intellectually honest, which they rarely are. I don't think they usually are intellectually honest. I think they usually are politically expedient for whatever's in their interests. But nonetheless, they have their right to do their thing. And if you agree with them, 100%, you should sign their petitions and go along with them. I'm just apologizing for myself why I will not sign these petitions. And the reason is because the way I see it, is that it's none of my business. I'm an American. It's none of my business what the Israelis decide to do. That's really the biggest thing. And I think but even if I was in Israel, even if I was an Israeli citizen, as someone who believes in a more or less either classical liberal leaning toward libertarian view, I cannot say that you have to adopt my religious views. Now, democratically speaking, these groups are a minority in Israel. So we're mostly really talking about Americans, either olim, right, as they call the immigrants, or just tourists, people coming to have their bat mitzvah at the kotel, right? And nonetheless, what about these other issues? But it's really none of our business. If you're not happy, we're in Gullus, we are in exile. It's none of our business what they do. If they, we should treat it just like really any other foreign country. It's not, we don't have a Sanhedrin. This is not a Torah state. And for our own interests, I think the bigger interests for us, as in general, Agudah usually has been, interested in their own interests, not really in imposing kiruv, for lack of a better term, imposing religion, other than whatever was in the status quo agreements. But beyond the status quo, it's not like they're trying to force other people to be religious. So I think, we have to see our interests as being liberty, meaning if we can let them be as liberal as they want religiously, if they let us be as frum, as ultra-orthodox as we want, and everybody leaves each other alone. Shalom al Yisrael. The only issue is, this was a koisel, it's in your face, so don't go to the koisel. If you're offended by that, don't go. The Satmar officially don't go, although a lot of them go, right? So be like the Satmar. Be like Professor Yeshayahu Leibowitz, who said that going to koisel is a avodah zarah. Going to the Western Wall, it's idolatry, according to Professor Leibowitz. Satmarov didn't hold like that. Satmarov went to the koisel before the Medina. It was only after the 6-Day War he had an Indian, right? And it's probably the most difficult thing of being a Satmar Chassid. It's not going to the koisel, right? I think, meaning the Satmar doesn't ask that much, right? That other Chassidim don't ask, and other Chassidim tend to ask a lot more, But like this, it's I understand it's a difficult thing, but learn from the Satmar. If it doesn't go your way, meaning yes, voice your opinion, and if your opinion is a minority, that's how it works, right? Right? If we're going democratically. The thing is, I also believe in republicanism, not democracy. I believe in protecting the rights of the minority, which would include these religious minorities that I disagree with. If they want to have... Now the simple answer would be, well, they the Reform and the Conservative can go to an Orthodox synagogue, and it's not a violation of their faith beliefs, but the Orthodox would be violating their faith by going to Reform or Conservative, which is true. But the thing is, we have Rul Yupa in America. There's an idea of preference, not only of what's the main ikar. All right. What about these other issues, though? The issues of marriage, divorce, conversion, and kashrus. Let's go through them one by one. The first one, I think the easiest one, is kashrus. Because no Haredi person eats Rabbanut, unless it's Rabbanut Mehadrin. So why does the Rabbanut even have to be involved in kashrus? It's ridiculous. It shouldn't be. It's totally superfluous and unnecessary. It's just authoritarian, and so that should go without saying. that the Rabbanut should be out of the kashrus field. But it gives them what to do, right? It's it's a job. It's work for Yingalite who need work. I understand. So they could go work for the Agudah, they could go work for the Chug Chatam Sofer, Chug Chassam Sofer, or wherever, all these other independent NGO kashrus agencies. The next thing is marriage and divorce are really one issue. If marriage is not an issue, then divorce is not an issue. Divorce is really the only real issue, and marriage would not be an issue, and divorce would not be an issue if marriage wasn't an issue. And the fact that that there is no civil marriage in Israel, it just makes tsuris. And somehow we manage in America not to marry mamzerim without the government. We can somehow we figure this out without the government getting involved. I think we can do the same thing in Israel, and again, I think that would lead to more people. A lot of the secular people resent the Rabbanut, and I think more people would be open to Yiddishkeit if it wasn't shoved down their throat by the government. I'm going to have to make a separate video about this conversion issue, because that's an issue that is probably most near and dear to my heart. But I feel that it's horrific. The hegemony, the terrorism that the Israeli Rabbanut has made about conversions, how it's become, they're making themselves like they're the Pope of the Jews. We don't have such a thing. We don't have, since the Sanhedrin disbanded, we're a congregationalist polity within the realm of halacha, and the things that they ask tend to be extra halachic as far as what the Rabbanut requires for conversion, which they didn't used to require 60 years ago. What happened? Was epis geschehen? To the point where it's easier to convert today with Satmar than it is to convert with RCA. Why is that? It doesn't make any sense. How is it that the people who are known to be the frummest people are the ones that are the easiest to convert with? The answer is because it's not a halachic issue. In Satmar, there are no chumras. In Satmar, there's Shulchan Aruch, and no politics and no nonsense. And that's why, even in Israel, you could go to the Eidach Haredis, to Moshe Brandsdorfer, and it's a lot easier to convert with Moshe Brandsdorfer than it is to convert with the Rabbanut. It's none of and again, somehow in America we manage to not marry Reform and conservative Gerim without the government doing our religion for us. We can do the same in Israel. Laws up. Live and let live. And we'll see, I think, in the end, a lot more people, and I'm not going to make a separate video on this now, but a lot more people will be interested in Yiddishkeit without the government hegemony of it in Israel. It's the same reason why in Europe, in so many European countries, nobody goes to church. But in America, everybody, the liberal people have their own liberal churches, right? Because religion, just like economics, works better in a free market than it does under socialism. And basically in Europe and in Israel you have socialized religion, whereas in America you have a spiritual free market. Socialized religion just breeds corruption and mediocrity, and free market religion breeds success, because the competition in the free market means you're going to have to offer a better service than the other guy, or else nobody's going to come to you. And so I think that's how it's going to work. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you all later. How do I turn this thing off?